you have been here before, I thought it appropriate just to say a few things about what we are. We're a nonprofit that was founded in 1989. We had our first summer of interdisciplinary meetings in 1990. It's co-founded by myself and Rick Chappell, who's a physicist that used to work at NASA. Our mission at that time has remained the same through all these years, has been to foster interdisciplinary dialogue between disciplines with a focus on Earth system science and global environmental change. So as you can tell from the structure of this meeting's a bit of a departure from our normal meetings. And to get a better sense of what they've been over the years, they've mainly been a mix of physical and social sciences around the human dimensions of global change and the biological and physical aspects of global change. The funding for these meetings over the years has been from federal agencies of the U.S. Global Change Research Program. And the agencies that have provided funding are NASA, the National Science Foundation, NOAA, Department of Energy, the EPA, and a little bit from the U.S. Forest Service. This particular meeting is made possible by, we're part of a 3-year grant from NASA, and the National Science Foundation is providing a good chunk of the funds that are making this meeting possible, thanks to Jeff. And also we supplement the costs of the meetings and some of the things that the federal agencies can't cover with funding from the Packard Foundation and the Hewlett Foundation, which are two separate foundations that were spawned out of the Hewlett-Packard company. Actually, the family is not the company. One of the ways that we get ideas for future meetings is from you, from meetings that we have. We ask during the course of the week for you to come up with ideas, if you're interested, for future topics of AGCI. And that's in fact how this meeting came about. Jeff had an idea and he submitted the idea to us, and then we took that idea through a process with our advisory science committee as well as to the funding agencies. So I think maybe on Thursday, one of the lunches that are not scheduled for anything, I'll pass around a sign-up sheet. So if any of you are interested in having a discussion about future topics, we could do that over lunch, and I'll collect those ideas. And sometimes we get a straw vote from you, and then I can bring that to the agencies and say, this is what the community thinks is important, and they usually are quite interested in hearing about that. And lastly, I think that it's important to talk a little bit about the products or what comes out of these meetings. And I think it's fair to say that the agencies have given us latitude to have the products of these meetings be relatively soft. They can be things like it stimulated people's thoughts about their own research, something like that, which is not a normal agency criteria. But beyond that, they do look for concrete things. So if there's a collaboration between folks here that might not have occurred otherwise, that would be an example of the kind of thing that would be important for us to hear back from you, so that we can make note of these collaborations in future proposals to the funding sources. We also are looking to have some written products out of this particular meeting. We've had journal articles that summarize meetings. We've had books written about some of these meetings. We've had reports that we've done ourselves. So there's a lot of different types of reporting, and Jeff will talk a little bit more about that, I believe, at some point.
Later in
the yeah, okay. And I guess we want to have the setup here as comfortable as possible for you. So if you have any questions or needs, please let Sue or myself or Michelle or Michael know about it. And we look forward to having a great week. So thank you. So I think we're, okay. See if you want to, you're going to go around the room and get introductions? Okay.
Well, good morning. For those who don't know, I'm Stephen Foster. First thing I'd like to do is welcome everyone to this conference. Some of you may be wondering why you're here and what this is all about. We'll talk about that a little bit before we get going. But first, perhaps we could all introduce ourselves, go around the room and just say your name, and then we'll at least be able to put a name to a face. So I'm Steve Foster.
Jeff Keel from Boulder.
Susan Moser, also from Boulder.
Anthony Wazowitz from Eugene, Oregon.
Sharon Dunwoody, University of Wisconsin at Madison.
Steve Bennett, also from Boulder.
Don Williams from Boulder.
Kathleen Moore from Oregon State.
Dennis Merritt from Madison.
Kate Yo from Boulder/Portland.
Mitch Show from Unity College of Maine.
Mayor Calicott from Denton, Texas.
Norman Willard, I'm with the US EPA's regional office in Boston.
Melanie Fitzpatrick, I'm from Tasmania.
Brooke Woodard from Los Angeles.
Galen Gowan from Denver.
Dave Abrams from Santa Fe.
Veronica Goodchild from the Graduate Institute.
Robert Nomination, same place, Santa Barbara, California.
Marilyn Weiner from Washington, D.C.
Cal Weiner, DC.
Kim Langmaid from the valley just over the hills to the north.
Nurture Berkeley.
Andrew Light from Seattle.
Tony Sochi, Washington, D.C.
John Grimm, New Haven, Connecticut.
Great, thank you. I'd like to also just point out, for those who don't know, the organizers of the conference. Myself, Jeff Keel, Susie Moser, Steve Bennett, Don Williams, and Galen McGowan. So, the other thing I'd like to ask people before we start is if you could turn off all of your cell phones and pages and other electronic devices that might interfere with the conference. That would be great. Well, as you can see from the agenda, we have a wide range of attendees. You represent a cross-section of different disciplines, expertise, and experience on nature and environmental issues. We feel the workshop provides us with a unique opportunity to explore our relationship with nature from multiple perspectives. It's extremely exciting to me personally and to the organizing committee to see this come about. Its origins come from a conversation that Jeff and I had over 2 years ago on science, psyche, and nature. And with the help of others, the organizing committee and the Aspen Global Change Institute, we've been able to sort of bring this together. And perhaps some of you are wondering, what's this all about? So maybe we could spend a few minutes and just sort of talk about the ideas that we had originally and why we think it's important for a group like this to be here and how we kind of see it unfolding as the week progresses. Both Jeff and I have backgrounds in pure science, but we're also very interested in the psychology of the Swiss psychologist Carl Jung. And we independently ask the question, how is it that humans can love nature and yet unconsciously destroy it? What is the psychology behind our actions, and how does that work? And so we decided to have conversations and try and draw together different people to have a different kind of conversation about the environment. Rather than having a very narrow, single-minded perspective, we wanted to collect together a group of different people with expertise in their own area and try and foster a dialogue so that people could perhaps get a different point of view, move out of their own particular specialty and get influenced and experience the positions of others from a wide range of disciplines. And as you can see, we've tried to pull together as many different areas as we thought would fit together. And so the idea really is to try and have people engage in dialogue, to talk about the environment, to talk about their personal relationship with nature, and how that influences their own particular research and their own particular interests and their own particular publications. So the more that people can interact, the better we will feel about the conference. We also, John talked a little bit about outcomes. When we sat down, did not really think that there would be an outcome, except to have people have a discussion, and then we would see what happened. We figured that if we can collect as many people like you together in a single room, that there would be an outcome, that people would be able to, their imaginations would be fired, and they would be able to create something. We didn't quite know what. And hopefully, at the end of the week, we will be able to sort of reflect back on what it is that we've experienced and what we've created. We're trying to get people to think a little differently. We are both very interested in interdisciplinary issues and trying to marry the idea of science and psychology. Jeff, do you want to add something to that? Or? Okay. You'll also see that not only do we have different people, but we have a different kind of setup for the meeting. I'd like to talk a little bit about the setup. We have what we've tried to develop, which is sort of a fishbowl approach. We have the regular presentations, and then we're going to reorganize the room a little bit so that we can be in an atmosphere that's more conducive to discussion. We would like the speakers to participate in a discussion of their own, and then after a period of time, we'll throw it open for other people to join the discussion. And hopefully that will stimulate a different kind of interaction. We'll have an open chair so that during the fishbowl part of the program, and so if people are interested in joining that, they can and interface and have the discussion directly. But then we'll have a much broader discussion as the day goes on. And then the second part of the conference day, we'll have people break up into smaller groups and have discussions about the material that's been presented. In addition to that, we have this position called observer. And some people have been selected to observe the process. And you may be wondering, so what do we do? The idea here is that often when we're very engaged in discussion, we miss things. And we would like to have someone perhaps observe what's unfolding, and then the next day reflect back to the group some of the things that they have seen, perhaps some of the things that they felt were missing, because often what's important is not in what's said, but what's overlooked. And so perhaps the observer can reflect back on that, or perhaps they just want to reflect back on the day and stimulate some discussion or closure about what happened the previous day. And then from time to time, we might ask people to provide some kind of psychological awareness of what's going on. Now, this is not about a personal psychological perspective. It's not how we feel as individuals, but more about perhaps what's the psychology of the group? What's been going on? Can we get some insight? Because often what we see in a smaller environment reflects what's going on in a broader collective context. And perhaps we can get some idea from that about how the general public, the world, the collective is looking at these kind of issues. And then as time goes on, we will also try to check in to make sure that we're going in the right direction, that people feel like they at least get a feel for what's happening in the conference. Again, there will be different kinds of interactions. It will not be a traditional scientific meeting. You know, I'm used to those meetings where there are 500 or 1,000 people, and you stand up, you give your presentation, then you sit back and then you essentially zone out. This is not one of those kind of meetings. We're hoping to have a lot more interaction. So with that, I'd like to turn it over to Jeff. Are there any questions that you'd like to ask before we get going? Anything about the format or anything about what your role might be? If you're confused about any expectations, anything that we can elucidate for you? Okay, well, I really want to thank you for your openness and willing to participate in something that's a little new and a little different, and hopefully something will come out of this that's constructive.